Well, hi everyone, and welcome back to the Costume Co channel. And returning with me, I have Sharon Gilham. She's the costume designer for The Wheel of Time. And she's back today to talk about season two because we had this wonderful, like almost like sort of 2 hour long lecture on all of the costumes from season three. So, Sharon, we're having you back today. We're not going to get into too many other things outside of season two, just because I had such a great introduction with you. But welcome. Thank you so much for coming here today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much, Heidi. It's lovely to see you again.
Yeah, and you're coming to me from, I think you said you're in the Czech Republic.
Yes, I am. I'm in Prague still. I'm in my office actually. We're working on Saturdays and Sundays these days. So yes, I'm still on the project in Prague that I was on previously, a contemporary show.
Yes, and we're hoping we're going to have you back after to talk about that once that's all in the can. But anyway, I want to celebrate season two with you because you didn't get a chance to sort of, showcase some of these costumes in our previous video. So before we get started, I was going to ask you about this. So, every fandom has a Wikipedia or a wiki, and I noticed you have a fan page there. Like that must be kind of cool, having a page on Wikipedia.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I didn't even know it existed until you told me
Yeah, I
in
found
an
it the other day,
email.
and I was like, "That's so awesome." So
So
yeah,
funny.
yeah.
I am honored. I am honored.
Yeah, so that's really cool. The next thing is, so we're talking about season two. So you were coming into this new, taking over season one after the previous costume designer left. So, how did you approach making this universe visually distinct? You had all these new cultures you were dealing with. This is sort of a very wide scoping question, and then maybe we'll start getting into some of the photos, and we can dig a little bit deeper. Do you want to just
Yeah.
give me sort of a general overview of that?
Yeah, so in season two, I started and I had a sort of not much time to start planning in advance. So I kind of had to jump right in because we were overlapping with the end of season one, with one particular group, one particular cultural group, the Shanshan. And because of COVID, they'd had to stop filming. And so I started at the same time as Isis was wrapping up season one. So the first thing I had to do was to create this army, the Shanshan army, which Rafe said is create an army like something you've never seen before. And also I had the whole of the world of the Wheel of Time to sort of start to understand and develop and grasp. And it's not something that you can do all in one go. It sort of reveals itself as it goes along. So, for example, one of the characters, Lanfear, has two names in the book. She's called Selene, first of all, and then she is Lanfear, but she has another name. And so you'd have information like that coming at you and just desperately trying to write notes and even trying to work out how to pronounce the names of these different cultures. Like we had phonetic spellings of the cultures on the wall in our office because it was all so brand new. So as we started, I realized it became very clear very early on that I had to differentiate these cultures I had to delineate these cultures very clearly, which I did via using a specific color palette or a specific silhouette for them. And the Shanshan was the first one who are these sort of alien-like, weird, terrifying peoples that come from across the sea. So I chose a color palette for them of rusted metal. Their cultural mix is Mesoamerican and Imperial Chinese. So I use the colors from those worlds and then sort of some of the iconography and the shapes and the types of fabrics or elements of those cultures and mixed them together and started to create this new world, which started with an army, which I've never done before, creating armor. Obviously, because a costume has to be worn, but armor has to be fought in. So you have to be really quite knowledgeable about what the restrictions are while not compromising the design. So it was a huge challenge. It was a massive undertaking. But I guess I just sort of did it in bite-sized pieces. And I also had incredible support with my ACDs, who I would sort of portion out different characters or different sections of the cultures too. And they would go off and expand my research and so on. And then we would come back and we'd work with the workrooms and the leather workers and the metal workers and the cutters and the textile department. And, you know, everybody was very connected. The location of the workrooms were all, you had to walk through the cutting room to get to the textiles room and the leather room. So everybody saw what everybody else was doing, which I think also helped to create a sort of unity and a feeling of us all working together as a team.
Yeah, you weren't working in silos. So which is nice too. So that way you could kind of go, oh, this is coming together, or maybe something slightly off here. It's not, connecting. Wonderful.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, anyway, speaking of the Seanchan, we've got a lot of pictures to show of that. So, are you okay if we start going through some of the photos that we have? We have so many, you have so many great photos here that you've shared.
Absolutely.
And the other thing I was going to mention, and I think I mentioned this in the last video that we did, is that my Achilles heel is pronunciations. Like I am so bad at it. Like I went through this with Game of Thrones. I got like, people gave me such a hard time. So if I get it wrong, I apologize, but I know Sharon, you will correct me. So, so starting with, for instance, how do you say this? How do you say this
It's
word?
pronounced Cairhien.
All right. So we have, we're just going to go through some of your embroidery techniques. Do you call this sashiko?
Sashiko.
Sashiko. Okay.
So the Cairhien culture is a mix of French and Japanese. So I wanted to create a color palette. In fact, this was after the Seanchan. This was the first group that I did. And again, in order to differentiate all these cultures from each other, I made a very clear color palette for them all. So the Cairhien world was navy or blue and white. And in the books, it says the higher the status, the darker the blue. So these are sort of like the ladies of Cairhien. They had these sort of little jackets that were made with kimono sleeves, which was the Japanese sort of influence. And then I used French, kind of traditional French costume as the idea for the French side. So they had these big skirts, sometimes they were padded, big kind of voluminous sleeves sometimes with embroidery on them, white embroidery, white on white. And the headdresses were a thing. I really love putting things on people's heads because I think it really completes the look. And so I rented some traditional interpretations of traditional French headdresses from Italy. And then we played on that idea, and we used lace as well for the men's wear as well. The men had sort of like lace stocks, and they had sort of like a version of a Victorian frock coat, but with kimono sleeves, or sort of kimono jackets, as like this one, Bartonez, which is a sort of over a sort of relaxed coat, like a smoking jacket, if you like, but a sort of kimono style. And then we added this embroidery onto the collars and cuffs of the menswear, which was a sort of referencing Japanese plates and crockery and so on.
Oh, yes.
So that, yeah, so it's sort of, things weren't necessarily exact references, but they referred to that culture and kept the color palette in these navies and whites. And Rand also inherits one of these shirts, which he wears all through towards the whole end of the season, and it gets dirtier and dirtier, and the embroidery becomes clearer as he gets dirtier.
Is it this one?
No, it is. Keep going. It's the one with the velvet jacket.
Oh, okay. Here, I've got it here. Is it
That one? Yeah.
Yes.
So you can't really see it on here, but on the collar there's white embroidery.
And you have a lot. You have a lot of that. I noticed on many of these, like for instance, Moiraine. By the way, I was just going to say. So when you were talking about the hierarchy of the culture, and so Moiraine has the most rich, that sort of indigo blue or cobalt blue, like your hat you wore last time.
Yeah. It's kind of navy actually.
Is it? Oh, it looks so bright on camera.
Darker. Yeah. But yes, so she's got these sort of, that's a kimono sort of coat over this padded overskirt. And the belt that she's wearing, we also created a sort of Franco-Japanese print, which was then printed and then embroidered onto these belts that the ladies wore as well around their waist. So we really created a whole sort of vocabulary and a set of looks that were very prescriptive for the upper classes. So in this universe, in Cairhien, we have the inner city, which is where all the aristocracy live, like Moraine's family. And then outside, what she's behind her in that photograph, there's the slum, which is called the Foregate. And in that world, I introduced this idea of sashiko, which is a Japanese mending technique where you stitch patches onto clothing and then you stitch over and over the patches, and the piece of clothing has a real value to it, becomes very, very valuable because it's had all this work and this care attended to it, which I really loved for Rand, because I wanted Rand to have a really strong look at the beginning of season 2, because we'd seen him in season 1 in the same costume from his hometown, but here we had to really establish him in Cairhien, and in this sort of slum, but still have a fantastic elegance to it and a beauty to what he was wearing. So this costume, this jacket, was made in Prague and then hand stitched by was hand stitched in Prague by a fabulous lady who spent ages and we had to repeat this jacket. So we had 3 of these jackets, I think.
Wow. Okay.
So she had to do all that hand stitching identically 3 times, but it just gives him a real sense of being anchored in that place and very much part of it and the Japanese sort of world.
Yeah, and there he is with Selene, who is, I guess you call her the alter ego of
Yeah,
Lanfear. Or
yes,
she's in
exactly.
disguise, or
Yeah, at this point, she's sort of in disguise undercover, trying to seduce Rand and bring her to her side. So I think that's why she has the name Selene. And then in this picture, she's actually wearing the costume. You remember when I was talking about season 3 and Rand's jacket that he wears at the end? That fabric of that top, that little jacket that she's wearing there, is the jacket that she wore. Is part of the jacket that he wore, sorry, at the end of season 3. So you see the connection.
Absolutely, yeah, because I love that jacket. But I noticed this jacket as soon as I saw this, like, it's like, first off, I want to say I love this idea of this upcycling. This is something we're seeing nowadays. We're seeing young people taking existing clothing and doing something really cool with it. Saving it from going into landfill. I love that, like repairing, darning. And I love how all of the threads sort of go with the grain a little bit of the fabric.
Yes, which is part of that technique too. That is the way that the embroidery is done, is in this sort of quite sort of geometric, uneven, even geometric shapes, and following the shape of the patches that are used as well. And I do think I love the idea that, adding these darning techniques, these stitching techniques, gives this garment even more value. And this day and age where there's so much throwaway culture of fast fashion, this is such a lovely thing to aspire to, isn't it? I agree.
Absolutely. I love to see a cosplayer reproduce this, by the way. I was mentioning to you cosplayers earlier. Now, then he has this other look, though. So, and like you say, you can't really see the embroidery on the collar, but you've done this. Is it Vorge? Is this
Devore?
Devore? Sorry, I'm terrible at pronouncing. Devore.
I've only had to say it so many times. I like ingrained it in my memory. So this is a jacket that he's given towards the end of his time in this place in Cairhien. He's in a location called the Sun Palace, which is like the royal palace of Cairhien. And I wanted him to end up at the end of the show with an iconic jacket, in the same way that he started the show. And this is not in the script or in the books, but he was in this place where Cairhien, this is the symbol, the Sun Palace is the symbol of the sun, and I wanted him to be given an item of clothing to go and meet Swan Sanche, that looked like it could belong to the Sun Palace. It's something that out of politeness and respect you have to wear when you go and you meet royalty in the Sun Palace. So the idea with this jacket was that we did a Devore print on it, and the print was made to look as if it was old printing. So it looked as if it was very old and valuable, and had been around for a long time. And so on the shoulders, you can sort of see, and on the bottom, it's sort of like faded print.
Yeah.
So the idea, and then it had lots of breakdown, and this is when we were in Morocco towards the end. So you felt like this was not just something brand new he'd been given; it was something that was revered from that culture.
Yeah, and you can see you have multiples there.
Yeah, yes,
As you have
always.
to. And then also we have so we have Moraine's sister,
Lanfear.
Lanfear. Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah. So we've got some you call it recycling, upcycling. Is that correct? Like how the technique
Yeah.
is used here?
Well, I mean, I think both of those words are used today, and upcycling is, I mean, it's a similar thing, but I think it's upcycling, I guess, is more the idea that you're adding something to it, to create something new. So the sort of bodice of these in these photographs,
Yeah.
is a piece that I found in a brocante in a French market. And I bought for, sort of like 10 euros or something. It was very cheap, beautiful, but it has it's a sort of organza, old fabric, old organza. So it's got a sort of stiffness to it. And then it had all this embroidery, white embroidery, which was one of the themes of Cairhien, white on white embroidery. Lily Bailey, who's our fantastic printmaker, graphic artist from the textiles department, she scanned that blouse and copied the print, copied the embroidery, and then made it into a screen so that she could print onto organza. So we could create sleeves that looked like they belonged to the bodice.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and the sleeves are printed with this puff binder, which when you heat it, it sort of inflates and it looks like embroidery. It becomes slightly 3D. So rather than a flat print, it's got a 3D look to it. And it was totally believable as part of this bodice. So that's what I mean by upcycling, I guess, is to add. Yeah, you can see in this picture, you wouldn't know that the cuffs of that blouse were not the original blouse unless you got really close to it.
The low tech would be like using puffy paint. Remember puffy
Yes,
paint?
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But I just love how you can use all of these modern techniques. Like I always ask designers, like, are you using 3D printing? Like all of these really modern techniques now that you can use to, combine the old and the new together. It just makes such a, it's gives the piece sort of like a little bit of history, but then blended with some modernity. I can't say the word. Sorry. You know what I mean? I hope.
No, exactly. And that's the thing, I think, with the Wheel of Time, the idea is that the period of time that we're in the world that we are currently in, the contemporary world of the Wheel of Time, is at a period where, in terms of the techniques available to you, as like pre-industrial revolution. So it's not, the techniques are not really modern techniques. There are no 3D printers. There are no even, there's no way to create screens like that. People would have embroidered things by hand, but it's like, how can we cheat that look to make it believable as that period? So that we're trying to use modern techniques to create an old-fashioned look, which is what was one of the many challenges of the Wheel of Time, and a really great restriction in a world where you have so much scope to do almost anything. It's really good to have certain restrictions there, so that it keeps you grounded, and it keeps you have a sense of the scale of what you're trying to achieve.
And then you've blended that kimono sort of overgown. Looks like it might. Did you custom print this fabric, or
no? That's an original antique kimono.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, so there's
you only had the one piece though, so you would have had to have been very careful with it.
Yeah, she only wore it in one scene.
Mhm.
It wasn't one of those where we had to duplicate it 100 times
Yeah.
for a stunt.
Oh.
And I was very lucky. I was coincidentally was introduced to a person called Fuji Maeda who sells antique kimonos. And so when I first started this job, I could just buy as many antique kimonos as I wanted, and
Oh,
the
that's
color
amazing.
palette of Cairhien.
Yeah,
So
they're
it
just
was
yeah, and
fantastic.
I love the motif, and I love the colors that sort of tie in nicely with her skirt there.
Yeah.
But now I've got some of these ones of Moiraine. So, by the way, I just absolutely adored her costumes in season 2. We did see, and of course it's fun now looking back at this because we saw that incredible transition to season 3. So do you want to tell me a little bit about this is your mood board, I gather?
Yeah, this is a little condensed mood board of the Cairhien reference and, as I was saying, the Japanese influence, the embroidery, the
Mhm.
big sleeves, the French period sort of look and shapes that we then converted and transformed into the costumes. So our costumes then became a mix of these two. And you can see the pictures there of the men as well. We sort of followed
Yeah.
that look for them as well, and gave them a mix of kimono jackets and then these sort of Victorian jackets, but with kimono sleeves or elements of Japanese design. And then we just sort of just started to play. And the designs on the right, the illustrations are early illustrations for Moiraine as we were sort of developing her costume. And in fact, it became a lot more streamlined than that, a lot more simple. We did
Yeah.
make her a kimono in that fabric, but we ended up, it was too busy for Moiraine. She needed to be much simpler and much simpler lines and single colors rather than mix of patterns. And then this is her final costume. So she goes
Mhm.
through a lot in season 2 and she loses her powers. And so she becomes less, she sort of goes from being really almost neutral, no colors in her costumes to start with, and she gradually starts to find herself again. And this is her final costume at the end of season 2, where she is regaining her powers, and she's sort of coming back to that Aes Sedai look that she
Mhm.
had in season 1. And
Very
so
heavy
this is
fashion.
a yeah. So we created this blouse for her, which was in the Cairhien world. So it's got the big puffy sleeves and some embroidery and so on. And then it had this little bolero top, which is revealed
Mm.
at the very moment where she discovers her powers. She loses the kimono jacket, and we see this. And I love the idea of creating an echo of this bolero that was made in season 1 by Rob Goodwin for Moiraine in leather, and is her real iconic look for season 1. And so in season 2, I wanted this blouse, this final look where she comes back to herself, to have an echo of that, but in fabric. So we created this little white bolero that went over the blouse, and we were saying it was underneath the kimono jacket all the time,
Yeah.
just waiting to be revealed. And so that was Karen Ferry, who on the left, who made her costumes, playing with how we could reinterpret the leather bolero from season
Yeah,
1.
because I think this blouse is actually from earlier, or is this without the bolero? Is
That's
that what you're
without the bolero,
Oh,
yeah.
I see. Okay.
So I wanted, if we ever saw it on its own, because you never
Mhm.
know when you're creating a costume, which is you're shooting, a third of the way through the shooting schedule, and you haven't read the episode 8, you don't know if she's ever going to be seen just with the blouse. We might have her waking up one morning or whatever.
Mhm.
So I always want to make sure that there's plenty of detail on costumes underneath layers, in case we remove a layer and then we see something that I don't want to miss the opportunity.
Mhm. One thing I was gonna say about her skirt here, as opposed to those, like, those more, French style skirts, is this one has almost like a Japanese look, like a hakama, like men's hakama pants. Is that what you're
Exactly.
going
Yeah.
for?
Yeah, that was
Or split
definitely in it.
skirt?
And in fact, it is a skirt, but it is
Mhm.
similar to the hakama. And she did have a pair of hakama style trousers earlier when she left Cairhien in season 2. And so this is also a reference to that. It's sort of a development of that. But Rosamond really likes having skirts rather than trousers because of the
Mm.
movement that generates. But this skirt had lots of panels on it, which again gives her that sense of movement. And when she, if she was spinning around or turning or anything, we kind of knew that in the end her channeling is very physical, and there would be a lot of movement in it. So it was in order to make sure that was available to her as well for that moment. And then it's got a sort of like a mini obi belt, Japanese
Mm.
belt around the
Mhm.
middle that's quilted, and that definitely gives the sense of Japan and the sort of hakama idea.
Okay, well, next we have now of all the costumes you've designed, have you had the most response about Lanfear? Like, of all the costumes, which ones are like? It just seems to me this is pretty popular.
Yes, it's true. It's true that I mean, Lanfear, I don't know if it's because people can identify more with her costumes, apart from this one, because they are, a lot of them are more modern because she comes
Mm,
from a future time.
like this one.
And so her costumes, like this one, for example, is very kind of dominatrix of our
Mhm.
world. It's the headdress, I think, that really makes it into puts it really firmly into the fantasy world. So maybe it's something to do with that. I think it's also everybody loves a baddie, don't
Oh
they?
yeah, it's so fun.
Loves to love a baddie, and it's great fun to design for a baddie as well. And especially someone like Natasha, who's up for all of it and also loves costume, loves dressing up. And this particular costume did, I think, have quite a big reaction because it was, I think it was very unexpected, and it was another one of those ones where it was just for a couple of quite short scenes, but it's, where she is absolutely showing her real nature and
Mhm,
also her desire to seduce Rand. She's trying out these different techniques, and this is a very full-on technique in this dream world and dreamscape, which
mhm.
that was one of the things that is so great about the Wheel of Time is creating these moments, like a kind of tableau moment, or where you see that person in this unexpected place that's actually a real location. And in fact, when we made this costume, the headdress is made of laser cut cardboard. And it's very lightweight. That was the idea. And
Mhm.
this is a real location in Morocco, and it was very
Amazing.
windy on top of this hill. And gone to set in the morning and got her dressed, and then I got this call saying we're having massive problems. The first AD is going mad because her headdress was like a sail, and it was moving because it was so windy. It was moving her head around because it was like she
Oh
was
my
like a boat on the
gosh.
sea. And which is why she's only wearing it on one of the two scenes. The second one, they were like, when she's not wearing that again, it's going to hold up shooting. But yeah, so you always have to deal with situations like that as well. Unfortunately, you never know what you're going to get when you're filming on location outside.
And now I remember in our last video, you were talking about how you have the moon symbolism in there. So is the headdress supposed to be the moon symbolism?
Yeah, I mean, it is. Yeah, it's a sort of sense of the moon and sort of phases of the moon, but
Mhm,
also, this sort of devil-like, this sort of evil kind of pincer-like,
mhm. Oh, yeah.
aggressive but beautifully aggressive shape. And also, somebody commented afterwards, and I think I might have said to you before that I feel like things sometimes happen when you're so immersed in a project like this, where there's so much symbolism and so many ideas sort of feeding through, that sometimes things happen by accident, or by design. Who knows? Robert Jordan, that's out there somewhere, but they said that it suggested Saidia and Saidin, which is the idea of yin and yang that's very
Mhm.
central to the Wheel of Time
Yeah,
world.
I noticed that iconography is in season 2 quite a bit, right? On the floor, and like we see the motifs in several places. So yeah. But now that you mentioned the pincher, like sort of like an insect, that actually totally vibes. By the way, those boots, wow.
I know, right?
How long
So
did it
that
take
was,
for her to get those on?
yes, so my poor standby department on
Yeah.
set, they got it down to something like something like 6.5 minutes or something, but it was long and
Yeah,
complex
incredible.
because obviously they were built onto, they're actually the uppers were built onto a pair of existing
Mhm,
shoes, but nevertheless it's not quick. It's not a quick process. And then she had to walk across all this very kind of uneven ground,
mhm.
which everybody was freaking out about. But fortunately, again, Natasha just went with it. She said, I'll make it work. I'll make it work. So I'm glad she did.
Yeah, and this photo, like I was mentioning to you before, some of the other photos you have of Lanfear, it looks like a Vogue shoot. Like that, whatever that object she's standing on is so cool.
Yeah,
To
that's her sort of
capture.
throne. It's her
Yeah,
throne with the
it's
wheel on it.
amazing. And then we have this other look for her too. This is when she does a surprise appearance. Do you want to tell me a little bit about the Hello, everyone. It's me. Do you
Yeah,
want to tell
so
everybody about
well,
this
so
costume?
through season two, she starts off as Selene, as the sort of in disguise, shall we say, in
Mhm,
Cairhien's, and she's sort of trying to fit in, although she's wearing a very beautiful vintage kimono that's been made into a gorgeous little jacket. And then gradually, as we see her progress, she starts to reveal that she's Lanfear, and her costumes
mhm,
start to almost leak a silveriness, like the
mhm,
moon. The silver of the moon is coming out of her into the real world. And this costume is again, she's furiously angry at this point. She comes into the foregate, the exterior, the outside of Cairhien, and is throwing fire bombs left, right, and center. And I wanted her to have like a real drama to her. Obviously, the shoulders are the kind of shoulders that we started to create and develop for Lanfear, these very strong shoulders that
mhm.
became more and more pointed as we went through season three as well. And then these flashes, the silver of the bodice there. So that bodice is made of leather, with these
Ah,
silver and sort of like pewter chevrons. So it's
mhm,
like her silveriness still coming through in this, or becoming through in this sort of like almost silver armor. And the skirt is a kind of version of the skirt that she'd been wearing in the Cairhien. So
mhm,
she's got it's we were doing these, and we had these conversations with Davina as well, who was doing hair and makeup, that she'd be part Selene, part Lanfear, and the Lanfear became more and more apparent as she went through. So sometimes she'd have a short wig, which is her Lanfear hair. Sometimes she'd have the
mhm,
long wig, which is Selene, and sometimes and Rafe and Justine would give us like a percentage of how much Lanfear she is and how much Selene. So she's still got the Selene skirt, but the top half of her is very much Lanfear.
mhm. I love the long, like, hanging sleeves that you have there, the sort of built into
Yeah.
the cloak.
Well, at one point, she was going to have her arms chopped off. one of
Oh my
one
gosh.
of the scenes that we didn't have, they obviously didn't have time to shoot,
Mhm,
or maybe the money. So we needed something where we could chop the arms off and still have some drama. I think that was the idea, but with the
mhm.
long sleeves as well, and also the sense of movement that she'd have with it all.
And then you've got Ishmael?
Ishmael, yeah. So
Yeah.
this is just, I think it's all those lines. It's a photograph from a still on set,
Mm.
but he is one of the Forsaken as well, and
I got
one of
another
the
picture
people
of
who,
him here, yeah.
yeah, who've come from the he's come from the future.
Mhm,
And so his costumes are quite futuristic, more futuristic. And at this point in the story, he's allied himself with the Shanchan, who are these people, the lady with the mask and the long fingernails. And they're part of their iconography is this twisted leather, which all the soldiers have on their armor. And he's got it on his waistcoat there, around the collar and
mhm,
down the back. So it's got this sort of insect like. So he's just by the way he looks, he's allying himself with those baddies in the
mhm.
story.
Well, so the most exciting for me is to talk about the Seanchan, which we have a lot of really great pictures. Do you wanna talk about that?
Sure.
It's exciting. And I showed you this sort of just, okay, so we've got some, so we have Sue Roth, uh, lots of really great behind the scenes pictures. Oh, this is her here. But you've got it's almost like a hennin, I guess, like her headdress. What was your sort of inspirations behind that? I have a bunch of actually I have a bunch of the cultural ones, but maybe we can just dig into this a little bit first if you want.
Sure. Mhm. So the Shanshan are a mix of Mesoamerican, so sort of
Mhm.
Aztec, and Imperial Chinese. This was my first culture that I worked on in season 2. And so the headpiece was a sort of reference to Chinese sort of Oriental hairstyles, but the Shanshan are shaved, their heads are shaved. So I wanted to create a very like huge impact with Lady Suroth, because she arrives in from overseas, but she arrives in a very small village on a palanquin, which is a huge kind
Mm.
of pyramid. And I wanted her costume to have a lot of drama and to establish this look of the Shanshan, who are described as insect-like, and aggressive and violent and very dangerous and terrifying. And so I wanted her to have this sort of element of something with this feel of the reference China and these sort of very stylized hairdos, but also with this insect-like piece that hid her face, because one of the other things about the Shanshan is that the highest levels in the
Mhm.
hierarchy don't speak; they have somebody to speak for them. So this woman in this picture on her left, Alwyn, is called her voice, and she speaks for her. And so with Suroth, I wanted her face to be entirely concealed except for her mouth, but then she doesn't actually speak. So you have this kind of really interesting, weird power play thing going on, where you're revealing and concealing at the same time, and also just to create something that was really strange to look at. So
Mhm.
you can see in this photograph, you can't, there's a human being in there, but you can't really make it out very clearly. I remember when we were first putting this together, and Rob Goodwin, who made her headdress piece and the shoulder pieces, we were trying to work out how to create this visor, because obviously most directors and DOPs don't like anything on people's
Oh,
faces,
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
because you can't see their expression, and that's obviously so much an important part. And so we were trying to find something that was transparent, but that wouldn't steam up, that wouldn't completely hide her face. And by chance, in the corner of one of the studio there downstairs in the leather room, somebody found this in a box in a corner. Found this piece of punched metal that was
Oh.
laser cut metal, that was like a fruit bowl. That was a piece of very thin metal that you could mold into a shape and make into a
Oh
fruit
my
bowl.
gosh.
Yeah, and I saw this piece of metal, and I was like, "Oh, that's it. That's what we're going to use."
Oh,
And
that's
sort of
amazing.
Rob had made that framework, the leather framework around her face, and I sort of put this piece of like fruit basket into and it really worked. And I showed it to the director, Thomas Napper, and he sort of went, "Oh, it's amazing. Never seen anything like that before." And because the holes are big enough, you can see her eyes through it.
Mhm.
And so you can, in that first image, actually, I think the very first one, you can see there, you can see her eyes, but it's so odd,
It is. It's
it
just
just
distorting.
distorts.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I was gonna
Um,
say also, we're speaking about insect-like, it looks like she's got, like, mandibles, sort of like,
Yes, exactly.
Mm.
So Suroth, Lady Suroth and Turak both have this sort of mandible, sort of spiky,
Mhm.
almost like exoskeleton. It's like a
Yes.
mix of so many things, that you can't really put your finger on what it is. It's like the skeleton of something, but we don't know what that creature is. It's like they've repurposed, the bones, or revered some kind of creature that they have then used as their own symbolism, and their iconography for their status. So this
Here's
is Lord Turak.
yeah. Oh,
Um,
there's the costume. He's at, just on a mannequin, I guess?
no, that's
Oh,
him. That's
oh,
the
he's
actor
in there.
wearing it.
He's in there.
It's been cyber scanned.
Oh my gosh.
But I put this picture in because it's probably the only time you'll actually see what it looks like from the
Mm.
side. Because again, when we start to create costumes like this, often the DOP is just tearing their hair out because it kind of,
Mm.
I can't see his face and do
Yeah,
see the performance. But again, this he's also looks like he's got some pincer-like thing going around his head.
absolutely.
Um,
Feels
and
like
his
like antlers or like feel very organic.
Yes, exactly. That was the idea. Again,
Mhm.
I was saying earlier about trying to create things that feel real,
Mhm.
and that they come from the real world, or we are trying to recreate something that in a fantasy world that feels like it could be some creature we don't know, we don't understand. And that's the fun of the Wheel of Time, is being able to start to kind of just really, you've got this really rich text, but also expand it and look outside and see what else you can find to bring in to just emphasize the points that Robert Jordan's making about these are strange, these are weird, these are unknown, this is not what anybody would recognize in the Wheel of Time world. And so that's why they would create such fear in the population or the people that they come into contact with.
I was gonna say, here, like you've got a lot of that pleating technique that you were speaking of, and I love how you blend all the different colors together in that sort of technique.
Yeah, so again, this was the colors of the Shanshan. Lady Suros colors
Mhm.
are more turquoisey, but then these are more blue. But it's these colors of rusted metal
Mhm.
that I wanted to incorporate into the Shanshan world. And the twisted leather, the twisted technique started with the leather department on the armor, and then we used it in fabric as well on Turek's costumes. And his kimono is a kind of animal print fabric that has a sort of gold effect to it. So it's
Mm.
kind of lifted and elevated, and then we added more foiling onto the fabric as well. So it's kind of, you can see that he has a status, but it's not all gold. It has all the colors of the culture within it.
Yeah, and I think this is the illustration or one of your earlier maybe concepts.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So
Yeah, I was gonna say it feels very samurai in a way, like a high status
yeah,
samurai.
yeah, exactly. It was trying to kind of give him a sense of pageantry,
Mhm.
and also the sense of a leader and the sense of armor, but really it's much more of a status out costume. And then his armor that I think you showed in an earlier picture,
Oh, yes, right here.
where he's got, yeah, there we are. So he's got elements of what the soldiers have in those skirts, which have all the twisted metal and the belts and so on. And then the shoulder pieces there were actually made of metal.
Oh my
Poor
gosh.
actor. Because this was made, we shot this in Morocco, and this costume was finished in Prague at the very much at the last minute. And I think if we'd done it again, we would have made those in a much more user-friendly
Mhm.
material. But the actor was amazing because he had to. They also have these very, very long, two very long fingernails.
Yeah, I know
Um,
which they gesture with.
yeah, exactly. And then has to do a sword fight with
So funny.
these fingernails, these shoulders, and everything else, and all the many layers of fabrics that he's got
I'm
on
sure
his
he
costume.
must have been delighted though. How cool is this? Like, I mean, if I got to wear something like that, that would be absolutely cool.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah. Now we have so Alwyn
Yep.
Sarath. Okay, so here she is.
So this is yeah. So this character is her character name is Alwyn, and she's called Suroth's voice. So she
Yeah.
speaks for Suroth. She's a sort of lower class citizen, like a lady in waiting, I suppose.
Mhm.
And this idea of having face coverings was quite interesting to me, and so I wanted her also to have something that distorted her face, but she was very clearly visible through it still. It's kind of has elements of like an alien or something that's
Mhm.
been like a cage, alien cage that's on her skin, on her face. But her mouth is clearly visible through it. That was the most important thing. It's like she is nothing except a voice. Um, And then her costume is made, I use these fabrics quite a lot, of these sort of animal print, like reptilian prints, which have a really fabulous texture. And then we added also on hers, you can't really see it in these pictures, but she's got like copper foiling to give it a bit of a boost, a bit of a lift on those layers as well. And then she's got many layers of underskirts and so on, and lots of pleating, which is what the Seanchan world is very much part of their culture.
And I love this headpiece here. It looks like it's like it looks like it's her hair, or maybe maybe the wig department did it, but I love, like, it looks like cylinders.
Yeah, so that's part of her hair piece, you know, in the same way that Suroth has these big a fake horns coming out of her head of hair, or in fact it was feathers in the end on Suroth's headpiece, because we went round the houses with that headpiece as well, not just the front, the mask part, but the hair. We were going to do it with real hair. And then it just didn't work. It wasn't smooth enough. And then we were going to lacquer it and paint it. And we ended up sculpting that shape and adding feathers to it, and which was really great, because I'd wanted to put feathers in their costumes because of the Mesoamerican sort of Aztec feel, but we just wanted to be really careful about cultural appropriation in this specifically in this group. But we got the feathers in there, even though it was very subtle, but it was very much part of her costume. And then Turek also has feathers within the layers of his shoulder pieces, black feathers. So it was very satisfying to get that in there as well.
Yeah, so I wanted to, what was I going to ask you? It'll come to me. Oh, no, sorry. It'll come to me, Sharon. Never mind. I had a thought when you were talking, but it'll probably come to me later. Okay. So next we have the Damane.
Yeah.
This, to me, okay, out of all the costumes that were, slightly horrifying, terrifying, the Damane for me were the most disturbing. Like, what was your sort of feeling about them?
Yeah, well, that's good, because that's exactly how they should have felt. Because these are girls who can channel, who have the magic powers that the Aes Sedai have, and they are captured by the Seanchan and used as weapons. So they sort of enslave them, and they train them, or they chain them up. And the collar that she's wearing is the collar that's put on them. It says in the books they wear collars, and they have chains, like a leash.
Yeah.
And I thought, rather than just having a band around their neck as like a dog collar, I wanted to give them something that was much more sort of heavy duty and oppressive looking, but also had a decoration on it, because the thing about the Seanchan is that everything they do is for show. Nothing is done, as a quick fix. Nothing is done just without much thinking about it. So all these elements, the detail in this collar, and they also the woman that is obscured slightly to the right is her Suldam, which is like a soldier from the Seanchan army, and there we are, and she controls the Damane with this bracelet she has on her right arm, which has also all the same symbols on it as the neck piece, the collar that Egwene's wearing. This is later on. That should never happen, that two people no, that picture I sent it deliberately, but normally the Damane are wearing the collar,
yes,
and the Suldam are wearing the bracelet, and through the bracelet they can physically control the Damane. And the other thing that I added in, which was quite controversial, but was the kind of dummy, as we call it in English, the gold stopper, mouth stopper.
Yeah, we call it a soother in Canada. A soother.
A soother, yeah. Okay, there we go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally horrifying.
Yeah,
pacifier.
Exactly.
Yes.
The pacifier, because the idea was, again, as I was saying, that the whole thing about this Seanchan culture is that the person who is at the top of the hierarchy doesn't speak. They have someone who speaks for them. Speaking is a very important thing in the Seanchan world, and what they're doing by putting this gold stopper in the mouth of these Damane is to say, you have no voice. You are silenced. And this also, though, it didn't just come from nowhere. There was an image in the reference that we found of pre-Aztec civilization that it was a drawing of something from an ancient artifact that
Let's see if
had
I can
one of
find
these
it
gold
here.
stoppers in the mouth.
Oh,
Yeah,
there.
there it
Sorry, here
is.
it is.
Yeah,
Yes, there.
there we go. So Mexica. And so I thought that was really interesting, this
Amazing.
idea of removing the ability to speak. So that was where that came from. And I think it worked very, very well as
Yeah, it's interesting because especially being a woman watching this, given our climate, our current climate, it is so much more powerful because, of course, these enslaved people are women and they have no voice. And by the way, so how did that work technically speaking? Like, how was that dummy? Like, did they have a bite or how did it work?
Yeah, it was like the thing that you use when you go scuba diving that
Oh,
you
okay.
kind of
Yep.
put in your mouth. I don't know what that's called, but they
Mhm.
had that inside the gold thing, so they could hold it. I
Ah,
mean, it's not very comfortable. You couldn't have it in for hours and hours on end.
mhm,
But it was a way of keeping it there, and you know,
mhm,
I think also these things, when even though it's uncomfortable, I think it helps the actors as well to kind of really get
mhm.
into the character and feel that sensation of oppression and silence and so on.
And then
And yes,
And then
um,
meanwhile, and then they did makeup instead for her enslavers. Like they instead of having they have the voice, but they kind of I don't know what the thought was. Like, did you consult with the makeup department regarding having that sort of full um silhouette? Like, you know what I mean, where the blue just kind of carries through?
yeah, in fact, I mean, I work very, very, very closely with Davina Lamont, who's the hair and
Mhm.
makeup designer.
Good.
And in fact, the original drawings, the illustrations, we added that. It was a sort of just yeah, it was a kind of war paint kind of makeup
Mm,
really
yeah.
for the Sultan. But I think especially in this picture where you can see, like, it's almost like the bottom half of her face is not even there, which is really interesting. It was an extension really of the costume, to be honest. But I like the fact that it does have a symbolism as well. Sure.
Hmm. So for the sake of time, are you okay if we move on to the White Tower?
Yes.
We have a few more. We have a little bit more. I just was hopefully we could cover a little bit of that. So
Sure.
I have this one here. I have Leanne,
Yep.
which is here. And yeah, what's your inspiration for some of her costumes and just in the White Tower in general? Like, what historical or cultural inspirations are you using for the White Tower?
Well, the White Tower is really it's where all the most powerful women live and work together. And there are 7 different Aja, as they're called, different groups of women, and they all
Mhm.
have their own role to play. So some are like the keepers of the knowledge, some are the police, some are the warriors, and each group has a color allocated to it in the books. And then I added in season 2, I sort of crystallized these ideas and incorporated a type of fabric or a type of a silhouette or something to do with costume that lent itself or was part of each group, to give them a really clear structure or an identity within the group. So, for example, the blues are the spies, and their costumes are made with flowing fabrics, because the idea was that they move around and they're sort of constantly moving and changing, and so therefore I use that idea of movement in the costume. um, the greens are the warriors, and they don't need to have armor because they have this special power, but
Mhm.
I use the idea of their jewelry as armor. um, and Liana she's sort of an interim. She's there's a very strong hierarchy in the
Mhm.
White Tower. The top is the Amarillan seat, Swan Sanche, and she wears gold. Liana is the keeper of the Chronicles, and she's the next layer down. So her Aes Sedai color is blue, but
Mhm.
she also wears silver because of her hierarchical status. And so her costumes have this sort of movement and flowingness to them. And that fabric incorporates blue and silver, which I tried to do as much as I could in order to indicate her status. And in terms of the actual shape of her costumes, we there is also the element within the Aes Sedai that you can reference the culture that they come from in the world of the Wheel of Time. So, and I can't remember where she comes from. Like that wasn't a specific reference in her case. It was with Leandrin, but I think we started to create this look for her, with very strong shoulders, very quite high collars, very structured on the top, but flowing beneath, which was very much her character, because she's a very severe character. But she still has this nature of the blues, of the movement, of the spies within her. So that was how her costume sort of evolved.
The next one I have is Adelius.
Adelaus.
Sorry. So here, gorgeous, gorgeous. I wanted to share this one with everyone before we wrap up.
Sure. So Adelaus is she is the sister of Berin. She is someone. She's an Aes Sedai who's sort of gone off the beaten track. She's retired.
There she is.
And she therefore wears whatever colors she wants, as many colors as she possibly can. She's quite flamboyant. She's very outspoken, and it was such good fun creating her costumes. And this kimono for her that we made for her was one of the very early costumes that I made for an Aes Sedai, and there was hand painted. In fact, screen printed and then painted and hand painted into by Lily. And I had a piece of velvet ribbon that I bought in a market in Paris that had these colors in it, and the pinks and greens. And I showed it to Lily and I said, this is how I would like Adelaus to be. And so Lily, we really dialed up the pink, because it's not it's quite a modern color. And that is, again, the Wheel of Time world is where there's a cultural memory of a color, or there's an ability to create a color which in pre-industrial revolution would not necessarily have existed, but because we're in this cycle of time, we're saying that color could exist in the Wheel of Time world, even though it feels out of keeping with that period in our time. And that's the fun of the Wheel of Time, is that you can move things around, but you keep it's hand printed, hand painted, so it's not jumping around in terms of the ethos and all the important framework that the Wheel of Time exists in. And in fact, this costume, when I tried it on, the lovely actress who played Adelaus, she said, if my soul could have a costume, this would be it.
I was going to say, this kind of looks like a couture piece you might have seen from the 1970s. Like it looks like something like a high society lady might have worn to a party or something.
Yes, exactly. Well, that was the idea. It's that thing of just playing with periods and references, but somehow making sure that it sits in the world, even though it's not of that particular period. And in fact, with the Aes Sedai, there was lots of ability to play with those periods and cultures and shapes and so on, so that when you put them all together, you believe it's a really rich culture of women, not trying to be 18th century or 14th century or medieval or modern. It's everything mixed together, which is exactly what the Wheel of Time is.
So one of my favorite costumes from season 2 and in season 3 are the novices. And it's so funny because I recently did a Dune prophecy sort of thing. And I was like, how many ways can you do a novice? So when you came, no, seriously, right? So when you came to do the novices, well, I mean, obviously maybe there were some descriptions in the book, Sharon, but how did you approach that?
No, there isn't really that much of a description. I don't think. I'm probably going to be shot down in flames for saying that, but they're in the White Tower. They need to be in white because they're sort of in training, and I wanted to create something that was very elegant, actually.
That's what I want.
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry, I had to split up the pictures into 2 sides because it was like, you've overloaded So if I'm popping back and forth, that's why. Apologies. Go ahead.
No worries. So this is Elaine as a novice,
Oh
and
yeah, so beautiful.
we used this what's it called, that fabric? It's a kind of silk, but it's got a very rough edge, a
Mm,
roughness to it. So
okay.
it has a beautiful drape, but it's got a real realist. When you get in close, it's not perfectly smooth silk. It's almost got slub to it.
Yeah.
But maybe it's a
Like a
silk mixed with
dupioni
cotton. No, it's not that. It's not
or
nearly as
cheton?
sophisticated
Oh,
looking as
okay.
that. I'll have to try and remember what it is.
A raw silk?
Um, it's no, it's not. It's called silk something.
Sorry.
I'll
I'm
find it.
like
No,
throwing
don't worry. I
I'll just throw
apologize
all these
myself.
names at you.
But it has, as you can see, it's quite soft, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
has a
So
texture
pretty.
to it that makes it feel like it's not high end. It feels like it's quite a low, rough looking fabric. But also to create a white dress that is going to suit all different body shapes
Mhm.
is quite a number. So it was important to have something that had a waist that was quite fitted, but had a sort of longer skirt, and then they had a petticoat on underneath. And then they're working, so they can't be, working people
Mm.
shouldn't really be wearing white, cleaning,
So you get
cleaning
little
the white tower.
pinafores.
So yeah, so we gave them little pinafore dresses in linen that
So pretty.
just to give them a uniformity and so on. And then they all had capes as well, which,
Oh, yeah, I have a
because the thing
picture.
is that with the White Tower, to get to even become a novice is a major achievement. So it's a uniform, but they're not slaves or
Mm.
like servants really. That they're still at this elevated status. So I guess that's what I was trying to get at with their costumes.
Yeah, and one of the things I was gonna mention is I kind of love how you didn't do a full length skirt, you did sort of at a mid calf, I suppose, or just
Hmm.
above the ankle, and you can see her ankles, and she's got these cute little, like, Victorian style boots or something?
Yeah, exactly. Those boots were made in Portugal. They are Victorian style,
Mhm,
absolutely. And then, yeah, because they're the younger generation, or they're the sort of the starting point. So then, when you get to become an accepted, like that
mhm,
illustration of Nynaeve, then you're in a full length dress, and that's part of the progression towards being an Aes Sedai, where
mhm,
generally, apart from the warriors who often wear trousers, they're in sort of quite elegant gowns, full length gowns, and so on.
mhm. Yeah, and they did really, they did really look great on everyone. I thought they were very flattering, and I love
Yeah.
these little pinafores. I would totally wear one of these, by the way,
Yeah.
in my kitchen. You could launch a product line
Yeah,
of,
for sure.
work or even in your garden. I could see that in your garden shed doing
Yeah,
this. Wouldn't that be sweet? You could put all your tools in those
absolutely. Because
big,
they're
deep
lovely.
pockets.
Yeah. They're such a lovely linen as well, like
Mhm.
beautiful kind of grayish
Yeah.
brown linen.
And I've got sorry, I kept pulling this up because it popped up, but, did you wanna talk a little bit about this costume a bit? I think this is
Yeah,
Leandrin.
only this is Leandrin, and this is her second costume in season 2, where
Mhm.
she really starts to show her darker side.
Mm.
And she's wearing, in the first section, she's wearing a dress, and now this is a pair of trousers and a tunic.
Do you mind if I ask the one Reddit question before I let you go?
Sure.
I was gonna ask this one. This is actually, I think, a season 3 question that's from Hannah 1214. She says, "I'd like to know about the background of Alviarin." I probably said that wrong. Alviarin? Her costumes?
Alvirin.
Elviran, sorry,
Alvirin.
apologies. And if those black shoes were an intentional hint. Also, if her dress in the flashbacks was intended to resemble snake scales.
All I can say is one thing: nothing ever happens by accident.
Well, that's great because you're going to confirm her because I saw her posting about this on another thread, and I that's why I wanted to ask you. So okay, and then what about the snake scales? Are you allowed to comment on that?
No, yeah, to be honest, we had all these white fabrics. The idea of
Mhm,
the white Arger and the white tower, they are the architects. So their costumes are sort of architectural and streamlined. But obviously when you're working with white fabric, you know, white on white is interesting once or twice, but you want to have a bit of texture in there. And that it was a happy accident. Another one of those ones where I love it when the audience picks up on things which were not necessarily my intention, but absolutely work and are part of the character. And maybe it was just another happy accident that that fabric had that meaning for her character in that costume.
Well, Sharon, thank you so much for answering all my questions. And also, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention this. I really hope that Wheel of Time finds another home. It happened with The Expanse, so I'm fingers crossed. You don't have to talk, make any comments if you don't want to. And also, I hope,
No, I
yeah,
mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, I would absolutely love it. I can't say anything else because I know nothing else. But yes, I agree. I think we're not finished with the storytelling. We need a bit of resolution with the end of season 3. But in the meantime, it was an absolutely amazing experience to work on, and I've learned so much and had so much fun. And I really appreciate all the feedback from the fans and all the love that people have had for the show.
And also, you have such a wonderful display on your Instagram, and I'm going to make sure I put a link to that. Like, you're so like sharing. You're very generous with your images and your behind the scenes processes, and we really appreciate that. Us nerds, we love being able to see everything that happens behind the scenes and all of your inspirations. So, thanks so much for taking the time and spending my morning with me and your early afternoon with you. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, Heidi. Always a pleasure. It's so lovely to talk to you.
Can't wait to have you back to talk about your other show. So thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate it. And make sure you check out the first part where we talked about season 3. So thanks a lot and have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.